Hi, virtual students. We are here with Unit 1, Part 3, continuing those notes that we would have done from previous parts. So starting out with the daily blog here, go ahead and take a second to try to define what the word incentive means, um, and then try to give something somebody responds to. Not trying to trick you, okay? It's a little bit easier than what you might think, but go ahead and take a shot, get something typed in there. So, if you're kind of struggling, you usually don't like think of this word necessarily too often. We usually use the word like a reward or punishment, and an incentive is going to be anything that you get for doing something. And like I said, it can be a reward or a punishment. We're going to use it pretty specifically here with one of the things we're talking about. So, we're getting into some things what are referred to as economic principles, and basically, it's just kind of the way that economists start their thought process, right? We talked about economists being scientists and trying to make predictions and trying to figure out things that they can use to influence people's behavior. Okay, so we're going to use these economic principles. You don't have to have them memorized. I'm going to go through them pretty fast. And again, like we said, some of these things are going to be some pretty common sense. So first principle is that we've got to make choices, right? So people choose. It could be as simple as deciding to spend time doing this virtual stuff versus playing video games. But we know that we have to make choices because we can't be in two places at once, so to speak. All right. We also know that our choices have costs and that when we choose to do something, we're obviously giving up the opportunity to do something else. And so whether that's spending money on, a nicer car and deciding not to spend money on, um, I don't know, a new video game system or whatever, our choices are going to that we make are going to leave other things out. Um, we also have the consequences. Okay, our choices; those consequences lie both today and in the future. And sometimes they're good consequences today, and then bad consequences in the future, right? And so, again, what might make us feel good today may be a little bit more of a detriment in the future, and also vice versa. What is kind of difficult today, is going to pay off in the future. But again, these consequences again get more complicated, obviously, as time goes on, or can get complicated as time goes on. Now, going back to that word incentives, okay, is that we can also say that people are going to respond to incentives in pretty predictable ways, meaning that like if we can figure out what's important to them, right, we can get them to behave how we want them to behave. Just to give you a little bit of an example, I have three sons and two of them are old enough to kind of understand like punishments. And so, you know, you might think that, schools do this, they try to make a punishment like all encompassing for every single student, right? And some students don't care. Like for example, if you come to school late, you're supposed to serve a 30-minute detention or whatever after school. Well, some students don't care, so they don't stop coming late. Um, so like for example, my one son is really into sports. If I say, hey, if you don't do this, you won't be able to watch a sports game tonight, whatever we might be watching. And that's going to completely change his world. He's going to do exactly what I want him to do. Whereas my other one, if I he is into like, well, right now he's into Godzilla. And so if I told him like, hey, listen, if you don't do what you're supposed to do, you can't watch sports tonight. He'd just say, so what? Right. But so I've got to come up with a more creative way, which, like I said, he's into Godzilla. And if I say, hey, there's no YouTube Godzilla videos if you don't do this, it's almost immediate that he's going to respond in that certain way. And so again, we know that people respond to these incentives. Finding these incentives can be a little bit more difficult. So I have an example for you here. Again, another daily blog. So we have a situation. This is actually from South Africa, but this manager is basically rewarding customers for not getting a receipt. Okay, and he is or she is asking them, saying, "Hey, listen, if you don't get a receipt, you get $100," which the South African rand is what it's called, isn't the same value, but basically giving people money if they don't get a receipt. What I want you to do is try to come up with a couple answers real quick as to why they're doing that. Okay, what incentive is the store owner doing? All right, hopefully you took a second. And again, we have some things. Usually, some common answers are you have, some customer service. Hey, listen, they're going to take care of you. They care about the customer. They maybe they're going to get you to buy something because you may not get that receipt, kind of like a lottery situation. Um, in actuality, this guy is trying to save a whole lot of his resources. In this particular case, he had a cashier that was stealing from him, and the cashier obviously, if we think about like, okay, well, how do you catch somebody stealing from? Well, I want to catch them on camera. Well, most gas stations, as we know, and this looks like a gas station for the most part, have video cameras. So, okay, all right. So they are expensive to install. Maybe they don't have them, but all right. So they have that expense. Well, remember too, what has to happen is if I'm going to catch somebody stealing on camera, I've got to watch all that footage, right? That's an extremely a long amount of time to watch somebody run a cash register, right? And so he comes up with this. Basically, he hires so-called video cameras, right? And he gets the people to kind of do it for him. Kind of a little ingenious way to keep an eye on what's going on. Some other answers too, revolve around, like if you ever ran a cash register before, like making sure the money is correct at the end of the day. Those are common answers as well. All right, these principles here, we're just going to go through fast. We talk about them later in the semester. Principle number 5 is people gain when they trade. Okay, if I trade something, that means basically I can specialize and get really good at producing something, and then let someone else get really good at producing something else, and then we can trade those things. So we can become, we like to trade with, well, South American countries, for example, in the wintertime. They grow fruit and vegetables in the winter. We like to have fruit and vegetables in the winter. Coffee as well. We don't produce very much coffee in the U.S. We usually import it from South America and other places in the world. Markets, which are just a fancy way of people getting together to be allowed to negotiate prices, are a good way to get economic activity to happen. Meaning that if the prices can change, we're going to find out really fast if the price is too high or the price is too low. Right? If the price is too high, no one's going to buy it. Think about like a garage sale. Well, those of you that have participated in a garage sale before, you know that like at the end of the garage sale, like if you haven't gotten rid of your junk yet, you're lowering the price. You're trying to get rid of it, right? So we're constantly being able to negotiate those prices, and this happens, on a super super informal basis. We don't see it happening like at a grocery store, but those grocery store people, they know the owners know exactly where to set those prices as they are putting stuff on shelves and putting stuff on sale and stuff like that. Sometimes the government can make things better. Again, that's going to be talked about in a more distant unit, but the government can do things to improve things, and so we'll talk about that when we get there. A country's wealth depends on our ability to produce stuff. We're going to talk about what it takes to produce stuff here at the end of this video. And again, if you have access to those resources, right, your wealth is going to escalate. Right, you're going to have more wealth, and again, kind of common sense, right? And what does it take to produce stuff? We'll talk about that in a little bit. If we print too much money, prices go up. Again, it's not a be all end all just to distribute money to people. We know that when we print too much money, that prices will go up. And then the last one is that society faces a short run trade off between inflation and unemployment. So we usually look at inflation as a bad thing, and unemployment is obviously a bad thing. But we usually look at inflation as a bad thing. Like we see gas prices go up, and we're like, well, that's no good. And so, in actuality, though, like some stable inflation, a small amount of it is actually a healthy thing for an economy. It means we're producing stuff. It means people are buying stuff. And in fact, when we see prices go down, that actually means the economy is not very healthy. That's what happened during the Great Depression. And so there's a trade off. Okay. And um, it basically means that the economy is never going to be perfect. And so there's always going to be some part of the economy that's a little bit, not as good as maybe another part, or, something of the economy may be a little bit worse than others. But there is that trade off. Again, another topic for later in the year. As we go through, hopefully we're able to, kind of give you some real life examples. There's some talk in government, usually something to do with the economy. Currently, right now, it's about the COVID relief bill. We try to present kind of the sides so you can kind of figure out who you would want to side with, who you agree with. Um, in the current situation, Democrats are kind of on the side of, we need to take care of more people because, people need to have an income, and even though it's super, super, super expensive, we need to do some of those things in terms of like the COVID stuff. Maybe a little bit less specific. Democrats tend to say, hey, listen, we should probably tax people a little bit more, whether that be everybody or just the rich. And then that way we can spend more money on doing things. Republicans are kind of the opposite. They kind of say, hey, listen, we already get taxed enough. And if we raise more taxes, then people, won't want to work as hard, and we should keep taxes low because people earn their money and then they're going to go spend it. They're kind of and then the government shouldn't spend as much money on people. And so, again, that's kind of two really broad ways, and not every Democrat or every Republican thinks those two ways that I described necessarily. But I think presenting those types of things for high school seniors, that are going to vote here in the very near future, hopefully, getting those thoughts in your brain, letting you make the decision to kind of see where people are at. But again, that goes into a different unit as well. Okay, so this last slide here, we talked about what it takes to produce stuff. Okay, and your first assignment looks like this. Okay, you're gonna take a quick little second and read like 3 or 4 pages, and basically answer these questions about these what are referred to as the factors of production. I'm going to give you these definitions right here. Okay, and as we talked about, we were saying that what's it take to produce stuff? Well, it's pretty simple. The formula is pretty simple as far as what it takes. We've needed our natural resources, okay, sometimes referred to as land. We need a person to put that stuff together, and sometimes more than one person, right? If you think about a factory, well, factories have, in some cases, hundreds, if not thousands of workers, right? And then we've got to have some type of tools to do it, and that's referred to as capital. Sometimes we call capital just like financial capital, which is money. And but we also have like tools, bulldozers, machines, whatever, right? And we put those things together. An entrepreneur puts them together, and then we can start producing stuff with those things. So anyway, you can fill your notes out with that. Keep checking off the check marks on your list of what you got to do, and we will be in touch soon.